Hi everyone. So here I'm looking at a problem set that I've provided, and I want to do a couple of these in this video, specifically number 2 and 3. These are kind of related scenarios. So I'd like to start with the second one here, which involves event and guest entities. So we're given this little story, and there's a lot of garbage to kind of sift through. And one thing I like to say to students is, in real life, there's a lot of garbage to sift through. Like the reality of a company and all their little ins and outs, and no one's going to hand you a sheet with a little story on it. Most of the time, it's just you getting to the bottom of things, asking people about the business rules. Some of the business rules are probably not written down anywhere. It's just the way they do things at that company. So because you're building a database which is a representation of that business and all the little ins and outs and the representation of the business rules as a whole, it's really your job to kind of drag that information out of people. You almost have to be like a detective and a mind reader and put all those pieces together to the best of your ability. So anyway, that's enough of my rant there. So we have this scenario where you have a guy who has a wedding planning, like event planning business, and he wants to keep track of guests that attend his events. And so I highlighted the key phrases here. Every event will typically have numerous guests, okay? That is very specific language there. We're looking at many on the guest side. Numerous guests means many guests in this case. And let's see, reading through, there was a lot of garbage in this next sentence, but okay, so he wants to keep track of the people that attend his events, and it's saying here that some people, such as the governor's wife, might appear at multiple events that he hosts. Maybe there's a charity dinner one week, and then she's going to be at an auction, an art auction the following week. Both of those are his events. So he wants to keep track of the people that are attending his events. And it said there that a guest, such as the wife of the governor, may attend more than one of those events. So more than one means many. And that's another thing. Like the word many does not mean a lot necessarily in database. Two means many in a database class. Two means many, or really just the potential for more than one means many. So we're going to have a many on the event side. So right there we've got our maximum cardinalities. This is a many-to-many relationship. I'm going to, I do have the entities in Visio. This was made with an older style of Visio. And so you see, the entities don't look like those that we're using now. Let me, this might be a little messy, but I'm going to just kind of draw these instead of using the tools. And I just think it'll be helpful to kind of show how the whole thing comes together. So we have the maximum cardinalities. Remember, the maximum cardinalities always go on the outside of the line, the furthest ends of the line. The minimum cardinalities will come in a little bit, so we'll put those there and there. So let's see what we have for the minimum cardinalities. Okay, so I think it's helpful when you're dealing with minimum cardinalities, think about actually adding records to the database. And sometimes my language and my stories, actually takes this angle, but can I add a this to the database without a that attached, or vice versa? Can I put this one entity or an instance of that entity in the database without linking it to another entity as it's being added to the database? For example, can I add a Moraine Valley student to the Moraine Valley database without immediately linking that student to a course in the courses database? So, and the business rules determine that. But let's see what the business rules say about this. So it says, Ken wants to be able to add events to the database without any associated guests. So what that means is I can put an event in the database without a guest attached, which means the guest is optional. Optional, right? Okay, let's read further. Guests, however, should not be added unless they can be attached to an event. Okay, so what does that tell me about the event? Event is mandatory. Okay, I can't put a guest in unless they are attached to some event. Like me, this guy isn't just tracking any old person off the street. He wants that person in the database if that person has attended an event. Okay, so guest is optional, event is mandatory. Let's, oh, what happened? Oh, hang on, sorry about that. It's here. Okay, we said guest is optional and event is mandatory. So that's the line we would be looking at for that example. Okay, so I guess I will do this is going to be kind of a longer video, but I'll do the other one while we're on the subject here. So we have an event cake problem. So as in these events, they're going to have cakes, and the guy's going to order cakes to present to the guests. So this is the model that we just did. Okay, now let's go through the cake scenario and do this. Okay. All right, so again, we have to kind of sift through the garbage here, but okay, now it gets interesting. An event can have any number of cakes, okay? Maybe you've been to a wedding and they've had 2 cakes, chocolate and vanilla. 2 means many in this class, right? So that's a many on the cake side. A cake will only exist at a single event. Okay, what does this mean? 1 on the event side, a single event. You know, have you ever been to a wedding where there's, you know, they cut the cake and they pass out the slices and then they say, okay, now we're going to take this cake down the street to another wedding. No, that's never happened ever. So a cake is really only going to exist on the table at one event. You're not going to have a shared cake that's going to multiple events. Okay, so this is a one-to-many with the 1 on the cake, or the 1 on the event side and many on the cake side. So let me draw that line. Okay, so we said one event can have many cakes. A cake naturally is only going to exist at a single event. Okay, that's the maximum cardinality. And then the minimum cardinality, a cake is not going to be added to the database without an associated event. Okay, if there's a cake being ordered, it's for an event. It's for an event. It's not, you know, coming out of nowhere. So event would be mandatory. Okay, mandatory. I'm not going to order a cake without attaching it to an event. Some events, however, like the diabetes dinner, may have no cake. Okay, so cake is optional at an event. You can have an event without a cake. So event is mandatory, cake is optional. Let's draw that. Said event was mandatory, cake is optional. And there's the line that you would have. This, by the way, is the most common type of relationship line. You have a one-to-many with a mandatory on the one side. We call that the parent side, and an optional on the many side, or the child side. So there you go.